but they also, feel affronted as well when they watch a player like Caitlin get violently fouled repeatedly, when they see her gouged in the eye or punched in the throat. This isn't something that Americans should want or that the league should.
That is a sitting member of the U.S. House of Representatives. On camera, describing violence he says a professional sports commissioner has failed to stop. Not a message board post, not a hot take on a podcast, a congressman. So how does a foul call in a WNBA game end up on a track toward a federal civil rights investigation? Stick around, because the sentence right after this clip is the one nobody's actually unpacked yet.
Right. Let's blow this thing up. Let's
Congress is getting involved. We just talked about it. The Republican Study Committee is threatening, saying that they're putting the league on notice. If the violent targeting continues unchecked, the league could face a DOJ or an EEOC crackdown for violating federal civil rights laws.
That's the setup a Fox anchor gives Katie Douglas, a former Indiana Fever standout, before asking her opinion on air. The anchor lays it out plainly. The House Republican Study Committee is putting the WNBA on notice. And if what they're calling violent targeting continues unchecked, the league could face a Department of Justice or Equal Employment Opportunity Commission crackdown for violating federal civil rights law. That's not a talk show host improvising. On July 8th, 11 Republican members of that committee, led by Texas Congressman August Pfluger, actually sent that letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert. It gives her a deadline of July 24th, the same day All-Star Weekend opens in Chicago. Somewhere inside that letter sits one sentence about motive that's heavier than anything written about basketball. I'm holding that one for later because it changes how you read everything else in this story.
Is that helpful, Katie? And why do you think this has gone on so long? Like, why does the league not protect her?
Yeah, I think it is helpful. I think anytime you have lawmakers now using their voice and using their platform, I think it is helpful just to bring.
Douglas calls it helpful, and she's specific about why. She says it matters when lawmakers, players, and general managers all start pushing the league toward one thing: consistent officiating. Notice she's not calling for anyone's head. She's calling for a standard. That distinction is going to matter a lot more later in this video, once you hear what other people are demanding instead.
When you know that something's not right, you need to change it. So I think it is good that they hear from all different sectors, the league, and try to find a way. Again, I know it's a tough job. Being an official is probably one of the toughest jobs in any of professional sports and all sports, because it's right.
And to her credit, Douglas doesn't let this turn into a pile-on. She stops and says, being a referee is probably one of the toughest jobs in any professional sport, calling the calls officials have to make in real time genuinely difficult. That's a fair point that gets buried every time this story goes viral. The officials in question aren't cartoon villains. They're making split-second calls on a play that a review committee gets to slow down, rewind, and reconsider a full day later, with none of the crowd noise, the game clock, or the other 9 bodies on the floor competing for their attention in that instant. Keep that gap between a live call and a next-day review in your head, because it's about to become the whole story.
It's live time, but they've got to find a way, because it's Caitlin Clark definitely getting a lot of physicality, a lot of plays.
Do you think it's jealousy?
I don't know that it's jealousy, but I do think that.
Then the anchor pushes her. Is this jealousy? And Douglas doesn't say yes. She says Clark does have a target. That's a former player, someone who has actually been inside WNBA locker rooms, declining to wave this off as nothing. The specific play everyone keeps circling back to happened on June 24th, when Indiana hosted Phoenix. Mercury forward Alyssa Thomas made contact with her closed fist to Clark's throat during a scramble for a loose ball. Officials watched it happen live and called nothing. The next day, the league reviewed the tape, upgraded it to a flagrant foul 2, and suspended Thomas for 1 game. No whistle in real time, a suspension 24 hours later. That gap Douglas just described for you a moment ago is exactly where this entire controversy actually lives.
Consistent.
We gotta go. We loved having you, and I think you've got some big celebrations coming up. You've got a family member about to get drafted to the MLB. Congrats.
Thank you.
Great to have you, Katie.
Douglas wraps it up congratulating a family member headed to the majors, A reminder that underneath all of this is still just a Tuesday morning cable hit trying to land on time. But the segment did its job. It put a former player on record demanding consistency, and it opened the door to a much heavier conversation because the next clip isn't a retired player being careful on cable news. It's a sitting congressman with a personal stake in this exact player.
You added that Iowa has your back, keep the faith, Caitlin. Now, as a lawmaker from her home state and a father of young girls, what inspired you to send this letter to the WNBA?
Well, Tiffany, I think this is one of the wonderful things about Caitlin's entire career, from playing high school basketball right here in the heart of the heartland to what she's done with the University of...
That's Iowa Congressman Zach Nunn, and he is not a neutral observer here. Clark grew up in West Des Moines, inside his own district. He's one of the 11 names on the Pfluger letter, and in his own public statement, he said Clark has carried women's basketball to new heights. This isn't a lawmaker parachuting into a sport for a headline. This is a hometown congressman with daughters who watch these games, telling you directly why he put his name on a letter that name-checks the Department of Justice.
Onto the Fever, she has nearly doubled the sales for what the WNBA have achieved. This is an incredibly historic, almost once-in-a-generation opportunity. But most importantly, I think that she's turned millions of fans onto what the WNBA can be, including, as you noted, my kids. My daughters love watching.
Here's where this stops being about one foul and starts being about money. According to figures Nunn's office has released publicly, Clark is drawing 6.7 fouls a game this season, fourth most in the entire WNBA. And during her rookie year, she reportedly accounted for close to 17% of every flagrant foul called across the whole league. His office has also floated a figure claiming Clark is responsible for something like 26.5% of the WNBA's total economic activity right now, from tickets to television to sponsorships. I can't independently verify that last number, and neither can Nunn's office, publicly, with hard math. But it tells you exactly what argument lawmakers are actually making. This isn't being framed as a basketball dispute anymore. It's being framed as a business risk with a face attached to it, right as the league's most watched season yet is trying to build on the momentum from last year. Remember, this is the same league that just expanded to add the Golden State Valkyries as its newest franchise, banking on the exact wave of new attention Clark helped create. If lawmakers can convince even a fraction of casual fans that the WNBA can't protect its biggest draw, that's not just a public relations problem for Engelbert. That's a threat to the growth the league just spent real money betting on.
Performing better. We just can all be better. As we've asked three basic questions. One, how are you dealing with violence on the court? Two, what are you doing to hold violence accountable? And three, how are you holding threats both online and off the court accountable to help protect?
Listen to how narrow Nunn keeps these three questions. How is the league reviewing violence on the court? How does it hold players accountable once something's found? How does it handle threats that spill over online, off the court entirely? That last one matters more than it sounds, because both sides of this have been threatened now, not just one. Alyssa Thomas has said publicly she received death threats after the incident with Clark. Clark herself came out afterward and condemned the harassment aimed at Thomas, saying nobody in this league should have to deal with that. Add in that Thomas is engaged to DeWanna Bonner, a former Fever player who left Indiana amid her own friction with the direction of that roster, and you can see why fans on every side of this had something to be angry about before Congress ever got involved. This wasn't two strangers colliding under the rim. It was a play involving a former teammate's fiancé in front of a national broadcast, with 3 years of built-up tension behind it. Whatever else is true here, the online reaction has gotten uglier than the foul that started it, and uglier than either player asked for.
In this alone, we have seen Caitlin have 5 hard fouls called after the fact, 3 of those after the game was already over. This has got to change, and the league needs to do better.
5 hard fouls reviewed after the fact, 3 of those after the final buzzer had already sounded. A foul that only gets acknowledged once the game is over does nothing for the player who already absorbed the hit. And here's the part that should actually frustrate you if you followed this league longer than 1 season. This complaint isn't new. Last summer, a conservative commentator published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal making almost this exact argument, calling for Congress, the Justice Department, and the Labor Department to look into the fouls Clark was drawing. At last year's All-Star Weekend, Commissioner Engelbert stood in front of cameras and promised a task force would fix the physicality and officiating problem. And the league went on to hire a referee performance advisor to help clean up the calls. According to reporting from The Athletic, coaches and general managers from 8 different teams say the officiating is still, in their own words, not good enough. The league has had a full year, a task force, and a new hire assigned to exactly this problem. This is the same argument, one summer later, aimed at the same commissioner.
Let's listen
What
to this
point
clip.
does Kathy Engelbert's handling of this or lack of handling of this become a referendum on her leadership of the WNBA and whether that leadership should continue?
Now the story shifts from Congress to the media class, because this insider is asking the sharpest question yet. Does Engelbert's handling of this become a referendum on whether she should keep running the league at all? He's not the only one asking it. On Fox, analyst Christine Brennan has said flatly that the WNBA has failed to manage Clark since the day she entered the league. And Fox Sports anchor Kevin Corke put it even more bluntly, saying the league is wrecking its own golden goose by not calling fouls when it should. Not every player agrees the sky is falling, either. Fever guard Sophie Cunningham told reporters directly that she and her team weren't putting much stock in the congressional letter, choosing instead to focus on each other going into a playoff push. Meanwhile, fans voted Clark the number 2 vote-getter for this year's All-Star game. But when players themselves were polled on the best guards in the league, they ranked her 11th. Hall of Famer Candace Parker publicly tore into anyone ranking her that low. So even inside the sport, nobody agrees on how good Clark is, let alone how she's being treated. And UConn's own Gino Auriemma has said the fandom around this got so obsessive it turned into its own cause, separate from basketball entirely.
Dan, I think all she has to do is respond to the letter and make it an open letter and say, you know what, we're hearing you guys loud and clear. We appreciate your attention to the league and what's happening on the court. We're going to take every action needed, whether it's with our referee.
The advice on the table is simple. Engelbert should write an open letter, own the problem, and move on. But she's already said things publicly. After Thomas revealed the threats she'd received, Engelbert issued a statement saying the league condemns any and all forms of hate and pointed to new tools the league is using, including software meant to flag online threats faster. So this is not a commissioner who has said nothing. The Indiana Fever also released their own statement making one thing clear. Neither the team nor Clark had any contact with Nunn, Pfluger, or anyone else on that congressional letter before it went public. Clark didn't ask for this fight. Congress opened it without her, using her name as the headline.
And so if she would write a letter like that, take ownership, take responsibility, that's what we're looking for. And that's why, we're stepping in because we feel like the management and the ownership and the league is not taking the responsibility to protect every player.
Take ownership, take responsibility. That's what he says everyone actually wants from the league office. And this is where I have to give you the sentence I've been holding back since the opening clip. Buried in the Pfluger letter is a line saying unnamed reports suggest the attacks on Clark may be racially motivated. That single phrase is what turns a sports dispute into a civil rights claim, because it's what opens the door to the Justice Department and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission stepping into a professional sports league in the first place.
I mean, Caitlin Clark, she's the one that's been targeted. This is an easy one to say, hey, we're going to make sure we clean this up. But every player in the league needs to feel like they're going to be safe when they go out on the court, and there's not going to be some sort of personal vendetta taken out against one particular player or another. Right now, the Indiana Fever, I have a feeling they're feeling a little targeted.
And here's what makes that sentence so hard to just agree or disagree with. The lawmakers never say the attacks are racially motivated as established fact. They say reports suggest it. That's a much lower bar than proof, and it hasn't gone unchallenged. Several sports and political commentators have pointed out there's no documented evidence tying any specific foul to race. Clark herself has repeatedly pushed back on people trying to turn her into a political football, and she's publicly credited the black players who built this league long before she ever arrived. Fever head coach Stephanie White has made a similar point about the ugliest corners of the online reaction, calling the toxicity and racism she's seen directed at players unacceptable, while arguing most of it is coming from bad faith accounts trying to stir division rather than from actual fans of the sport. So you've actually got three separate things tangled together here, and they are not the same argument. 1. A real officiating problem this league promised to fix a year ago, and by its own coach's account, still hasn't. 2. An online hate campaign aimed at more than one player that everyone involved, Clark included, has personally condemned. 3. An unproven allegation of racial motive that 11 lawmakers chose to put in writing anyway, aimed at the single most bankable star in the sport's history, in the middle of an election year. You can believe the officiating is broken without believing the racism claim, and you can believe the online hate is real without believing Congress needed to send a letter about it. Keep those three arguments separate, because this story only gets confusing when people pretend they're one thing.
But they also, feel affronted as well when they watch a player like Caitlin get violently fouled repeatedly, when they see her gouged in the eye or punched in the throat. This isn't something that Americans should want or that the league should.
Hearing that line again now hits differently than it did at the start of this video, because now you know exactly what it's attached to. That's not just outrage over a foul. That's a member of Congress, on camera, attaching words like gouged and punched to a fight that's already reached a letter referencing the Department of Justice. Mark July 24th on your calendar. That's the deadline the Republican Study Committee gave Commissioner Engelbert, and it's also the day the WNBA's biggest showcase of the year opens in Chicago. She either answers 3 direct questions about officiating, accountability, and online threats, or she walks into All-Star Weekend with a live political fight sitting on her desk. This fight already has the White House's attention too. Before the letter was even sent, President Trump told reporters he thought Clark was treated rather rough, calling the incident a bad event. Whatever you think about lawmakers writing letters to a sports league, the file on Engelbert's desk isn't small. It's a genuine officiating problem the league said it fixed, and, according to its own coaches, didn't. It's online hate aimed at multiple players that everyone involved has already condemned. And it's an election year allegation of racial motive that could pull federal investigators into a professional basketball league before the summer's over. So here's the actual question worth arguing about below. Is the WNBA's real problem inconsistent officiating that happens to keep landing on its biggest star, or is this letter a political stunt wearing a player safety costume? Tell me which one you actually believe, and why. If this breakdown helped you make sense of what's happening, hit like, subscribe so you catch Engelbert's response on the 24th, and drop your take in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.